Welcome to Paranormal M, where the extraordinary becomes the norm. Subscribe, tap the notification bell, and join us on a quest through our latest thought-provoking tales. We hope you're ready to question everything you thought you knew. My scariest paranormal experience. About 2 years ago, in the dead of winter, my power went out. This was a big problem for me, because I have a pet leopard gecko who requires heating elements to survive. It started getting very cold in my apartment very quickly. The point I became worried about my pet's safety, did the only thing I could think of to do, which was to take my gecko to my car and crank the heater up. Normally we get a few power outages every winter in my area, and they last maybe an hour or two. This time was different, because the power didn't come back on for 6 hours. After about an hour of sitting in my driveway, I got extremely bored. Started driving around my neighborhood, which had some more rural areas that butted up against a national forest. One of these areas is an absolutely beautiful overlook. This is a place where you can see miles of forest, and also a few streetlights, so I'd be able to see if the power came back on. So I drove there and sort of parked to enjoy the view. I'd had the heat running for a while, and the car had gotten a bit hot, so I rolled down the window to let some of the cool air and almost immediately started hearing something kind of far off at first. Kind of a weird, sad-sounding howl mixed with a squawk. I assumed this was an animal, but rolled up the window almost all the way just in case. Over the next 20 minutes, the sound got progressively closer and closer to the car. It almost sounded like it was circling me. I can still hear this sound in my mind, clear as day, even though this happened several years ago. And I know what animals that we had locally and what they sounded like. This didn't sound like any of them. I got nervous and decided to leave and go get some food and gas in a neighboring town, at least a town that still had power. About another hour passes and there's still no power. Having convinced myself the sound was just an animal and it had probably long since moved, I went back to the overlook to enjoy my meal. About another hour goes by without anything happening. No noise, no nothing, until eventually I see movement among the big rocks in front of me. It's starting to get dark, so I can't really make it out perfectly, but at one point it looked like the head of a disfigured animal peered at me and looked over a rock and then disappeared. I see this several more times, but I stay, because if this was an animal, there was probably something severely wrong with it. Be it an injury or a birth defect that would probably affect its quality of life. I wanted to be able to let the animal control know that they could find it and help it or put it out of its misery if necessary. Especially since it was clearly staying in that exact area. After a while, it starts making noise again. The same one as before, but now it's almost added this horrible gurgling and sounds almost human. At this point, it's gotten completely dark, and I can't see much of anything, but I can still hear it circling the car. Eventually, I hear what sounds like something messing around near the back tire, and I panic. I peel out of the parking spot. I look behind me and see what's now very clearly a person in the taillights. They attempted to chase the car for a few feet, but quickly gave up. Is it possible this was a person under the influence or suffering from a mental health issue? Yeah, I guess it definitely is, but it seems pretty unlikely since it was probably below 30 degrees outside, and far enough out of everybody's way that I doubt anybody'd be hanging out there, let alone hanging out there for hours and wearing what appeared to be animal skin on their head. If it wasn't a person, based on the location and how the thing looked, probably a skinwalker. This experience still terrifies me to this day. I believe I may have a recording of the sound. I'll try to find it. But if I can't find it, I'll post it, but due to the power outage, I didn't film or record most of the experience to conserve my already dying phone. Was something warning me of flooding in my garage twice? A bit of background. I have a cheap white noise maker from a retail store. I prefer the ocean setting, but if you unplug it and power it back on, it defaults to a water dripping or stream sound. I'm pretty sensitive to a sudden change in white noise, so it usually wakes me up, especially if our house loses power for a second. So there's been a string of cold days lately in the PNW. Multiple days below 30 in a row. Our washer and dryer out in the garage. We've never had a problem before, but this year, our washing machine supply lines froze. I unhooked everything, routing the lines to a bucket, so when they thawed, I could catch the water. Onto the taps themselves. The hot water wasn't frozen, so I left it dripping. The cold water was frozen, though. I did what I could with my heat gun before putting it nearly closed. The idea is that if it thaws, any excessive pressure will be relieved as long as the tap is somewhat open. It was supposed to rise above freezing the following afternoon for the first time in a few days. My cat's auto feeder goes off at noon, but she likes to wake me up an hour before it goes off. I wanted some sleep, so I got up around 11:40 to press the food button to get some peace and quiet. While I was up, I poked my head into the garage. The hot water tap was still dripping, but the cold water was frozen shut. I headed back to bed. At around 12:20, I'm half awoken by my white noise machine switching to a running stream instead of, an ocean setting. I'm still pretty asleep, but I roll out of bed to switch the setting back. My cat is really excited to see me out of bed, so I humor her and follow her to the kitchen where I hear water trickling noises. I look into the garage to find the cold water tap is thawed, and I hadn't closed the tap enough as water was spraying everywhere. I managed to get the tap closed to a drip, and most of the water mopped it up. There really wasn't much water, like I had caught it just after it started. I actually really needed some laundry done, so I threw a load in and hooked the thawed supply lines back up. I start the machine and get back into bed. I have a bad habit of scrolling on my phone instead of trying to sleep, especially after being woken up too many times. I'm scrolling on my phone, snuggling with my girlfriend who sleeps in a way later way than I do. She's starting to wake up and chat with me. Then the white noise machine switches to the running stream setting for the second time that morning. I ignored it this time, as it was nice and warm in bed. 5 minutes later, my girlfriend wakes up fully and wonders why the white noise is different. I tell her it happened earlier this morning too, but I'm not sure why. Nothing else loses power. I eventually get out of bed to start breakfast, switched off the white noise altogether. I heard water running in the garage for a second time that morning. Threw the garage door open to find water gushing everywhere. This time the drainage pipe must have been frozen because the washer was ejecting soapy water everywhere, and it was spraying back into the garage. This time it had been going for a lot longer than the first time I caught it. There was a ton of soapy water everywhere. The first time my white noise changed, I checked the garage almost immediately, caught the tap. The second time I ignored it for a few minutes, which lined up with there being significantly more water on the floor before I caught it. Is a friendly house sprite watching over me? Did a ghost mess with the machine to alert me of the potential flooding? I'm not sure what to think. I think I've become a null since the loss of attached entity. About 30 years ago, an event led me to discovering I had an entity attached to me. I called him the Faceless. Everyone else referred to him as my friend. He was always protective of me. Towards others, he was sometimes protective and sometimes antagonistic. But usually he was just neutral. I could always feel him if I tried to. At one point, he became so antagonistic toward a roommate that I reached out to a local group of paranormal investigators. At the most extreme, he chased her through the house to her room and audibly laughed in my voice on the other side of her door after she slammed it. He shoved another person's shoulder, poked another person's back, and would occasionally cause things in a closed closet to fall off the shelves. I met with a husband and wife, a woman who designed spirit boards, and another woman I can't quite remember. I told them the whole story about the Faceless and how he came into my life and what the current events were. After the meeting, the husband followed me to my bike, shared his personal insight with me, which I really thought was pretty cool of him. They were supposed to meet up with my roommate to get her perspective, but I think either she or they never followed through, and I never heard back from them. I can't say for sure exactly when this happened, but I've lost that sense of connection. I can't feel him anymore. I can say that once I noticed the loss of his presence is when the null began. I've never felt like I had any particular personal affinity towards anything spiritual or paranormal. And to be honest, I feel silly even saying that. I've always been like a hopeful skeptic. However, spiritual and paranormal things seemed enhanced, especially whenever I was around a Ouija board or spirit board. They would work better if I was in the room. Tarot cards did things I don't understand. People with the sight saw things more clearly or things they hadn't seen before. Just stuff that seemed weird to me. But I eventually just started sort of taking it for granted. Ever since I stopped feeling the Faceless, it's the exact opposite. I think the event that really made it sink in for me was when I went on a popular and successful guided ghost tour. And because of me, I feel like 12 people wasted their money. There was zero activity, for which this tour was extremely unusual. I could tell the guide was completely baffled, and even offered everyone on the tour a rain check. He tried one last spot, a location that isn't usually on the tour, but he was obviously pretty desperate. As my own experiment, I hung out at a spot on the road back to the tour's guide's office. And sure enough, they all said that they had various levels of activity and experiences at the spot where I wasn't present. I spoke to the guide afterwards, asked, if he had any insight or any thoughts on the conclusion, but he hadn't heard of anything like it before. I've tried a couple of other minor experiments, and they've shown pretty much the same results. One other weird thing I've noticed is I can't go into shops that sell crystals, at least not the ones around the Sedona area. My daughter is pretty witchy, or at least likes to think she is. And so we went into a couple of shops up there and and I almost immediately get dizzy and nauseous. I asked one of the shop owners about it. She suggested I hold something raw and ferrous, like raw iron ore or a similar mineral. I've tried it, and it helps a bit, but I'm still very uncomfortable. Like I can feel the dizziness and nausea just surrounding me without actually touching me. To be honest, I feel kind of dumb even opening up on the topic. But I miss my friend, and I don't know enough about the paranormal or spiritual stuff or whatever to do about it. I guess I'm hoping somebody can help me figure it out if I'm right. If I'm right in the fact that maybe I create this spiritual void around me. Or maybe it's something else. I'd love it if somebody could tell me how to reconnect with the faceless. But my heart tells me that's not a real option for some reason. I don't know. Maybe that's just my fear. And if I am correct, and I do create this null zone, maybe someone can give me some advice on how to make it useful. If I'm right and the faceless is just gone, maybe I can at least find purpose in what's left after his absence. Three knocks at the door. I feel like I've dealt with spooky stuff all my life, starting from when I was young. My sisters have experienced things. It's not just me. It's almost my entire family. My sister used to cry and talk in her sleep because she said something kept bothering her. She was around 3 or 4 years old. It got so bad to the point where my mom, Tias, and Grandma had to get the egg out because she was screaming and crying, "Leave me alone," in her sleep. I remember one time me and my brother were up at around 2 a.m. because my mom and her boyfriend were arguing. It was a toxic household. We were in the kitchen just because we'd be noisy, and honestly, you just can't sleep when two people are being that loud. My mom's boyfriend went in the kitchen, and he said he was going to go smoke. And while we were in the kitchen, we heard 3 loud knocks on the back door that led to the back porch. Now there's the door that leads to the kitchen, and then the back porch has a door which leads to the stairs in the apartment. And then there's outside, so all doors were locked. Anyway, we heard the knock come from the inside door right outside the kitchen leading to the back porch. I know the knock was from the inside because it was the only door that has a rattling glass panel on it from how old it is. My mom's boyfriend goes, "What was that?" And we all just kind of looked at each other confused. So I opened the door and it was nothing, just a dark room with all the stuff we don't use anymore. I turned on the light and all the windows were locked and the door leading to the stairs was locked. Me and my brother just decided to ignore it, go to sleep, and my mom's boyfriend just goes out for a smoke. We didn't talk about it after that. Not clickbait or a fake post. Can you help me relate a being my dad saw in the forest while walking the dog? It wasn't human, nor animal. He describes it as brownish in color, like a human silhouette with white flashing blinking light. And he also said it moved extremely fast. Also, apparently nearby animals could bark at it and feel it. He described it could move at the speed of a motorcycle, and that a cult was also nearby. I don't know how true his story is, but I always hear drums when I go into the nearby forest near our house. He says he knows that cult drums some things. My explanation is not that excellent, because I don't really know much information. Our dog also tried to go back to the place my dad saw the silhouette yesterday and today. My dad usually never really believes in these paranormal things. But when he was talking, he seemed pretty scared when he was telling me and my mom. And if it helps for, helping search for the entity, he said the cult was some kind of Asian genre cult. Please don't judge my information as I say again. I haven't seen this entity, and I do not want to. I fear nobody but God. If these kind of entities exist, that is the proof that God exists. Probably related to this, I heard a high-pitched fox-like scream in the backyard. I didn't tell anybody about it until now. I didn't think it would relate to anything, and also, nobody would believe me. And no, this isn't fake. Many of the posts probably are fake on the subreddit, but I can 100% guarantee you this post is true. I myself will try to research it. But it would be helpful. Anybody could help me. Maybe send me some suggestions on what the cult and the entity could be. Now, the last sentence I want to write maybe is a bit not safe for work, but he also said that in the cult, a woman once went naked into the city and pissed on the streets, and she was part of the cult too. I tagged this as shadow people, because this maybe corresponds to that the best. But again, if this was a human, he probably couldn't have the speed of a motorbike with 0 start time. I'll try to maybe scan the EMF in my house and also look out for a ghost or some other shit things. Dreaming my daughter's dreams. Okay, this is weird. My daughter, 11, has had nightmares, or at least very intense dreams for years. I, on the other hand, never remember my dreams. Okay, Gecko, relax. Except on the occasion where she crawls into bed with her mother, and I sleep in her bed. Then I always dream very vividly. Last night this happened again, and I had 2 nightmares with a storyline that's very fitting of what my daughter would have. Well, actually fears that she has. I mentioned this to my wife, and she says this happens to her as well. She sleeps in my daughter's bed. In the years this has happened, she's switched rooms, beds, mattresses, and, well, everything, multiple times. I'm a pretty level-headed guy, but my gut feeling is telling me something is afoot. Any insight from any angle would be welcome. I mean, it's not truly a bad thing, but my spidey sense is tingling. Terrifying nightmare. I usually slept around 2 or 3 a.m. because I'm a senior in college. Yesterday night I came back to my room really tired. I slept around 12:30 a.m. and had the weirdest dream. In the dream, I was traveling in a car with friends and cousins. We went to a large open place with lots of stores and food stalls. I got separated from the group. I was looking for them when a strange man walked toward me. His fist was closed as if he had something in his hand. He walked toward me and sprinkled and threw whatever he had in my face. Felt like liquid. I think it went in my eyes and I could feel some pain, but didn't know why. The group of people I had come with found me. They had seen the strange guy and what he did. They suspected that he had done some black magic. We hurried back to the car and go to a priest or someone who could help us. In the car, I could feel a voice inside my head telling me things like, "You should die." told him that it was a female ghost asking me to take my life. I don't completely remember how the ghost tormented me, but after some time I kept saying that the only way out is for me to kill myself. And as we were on the way, we lost our path and crashed into a tree. I don't completely recall what happened next, but I think the ghost had left my body towards the end of this dream. After that, I woke up. Do such dreams mean anything? It was a very vivid nightmare. Should I be scared? Currently, I'm in my living room watching my baby cousin. She's asleep, so I'm watching TV and just relaxing. The clock hits 1:57 a.m., and my extremely heavy, fully metal-enforced front door opens. I assume it's just a family member coming home late, so I think nothing about it, really. But about 15 minutes later, my sister comes into the living room and says, "Why the fuck is the front door wide open?" I had no idea that it was. I get very confused. My sister continued to say that she had bad gut feeling that she should just come out to check on me and the baby. I check my camera facing the front door. All it says is 0 activity recorded. For context, these cameras reset at 12 and show every single pixel change. So every minute or so it has another update that says motion detected, caused by wind or dust. So I'm very confused. I continue to check the camera facing the driveway, and there's one human detected notification timed at 1:57. So I click on it, assuming that I will see one of my family members that came in. As I watch the video, I wait to see somebody walking up, but instead, I see a glowing orb going straight toward the front door. I try to convince myself it's nothing, but I can't help but be scared since none of this seems coincidental. My sister having a bad feeling, the camera facing the door having recorded nothing, the glowing orb also. May just be tripping myself out, but all of a sudden it's freezing cold in my house around 1 hour later. Plus, my dog seems terrified. And on top of all of that, the baby I'm watching is very, very much a deep sleeper, thank God. But she sat up out of nowhere and just looked forward for like 45 seconds until I touched her, and she simply laid back down. Should I be scared? My stepdad is haunted. I, an 18-year-old male who stayed up late at night, lives with my parents, mom, stepdad. I call Dad. Well, he'll be referred to as Dad from now on. He goes downstairs late at night to eat food. He has problems sleeping and deals with insomnia, so he gets hungry at night. But the thing is, he always goes down at 1:34 a.m., always on the dot. As soon as it hits 1:34, the door opens and he walks down without fail. He always stays downstairs for, well, what could be hours at a time. The latest he's ever stayed down was for 4 hours. I was downstairs in the bathroom, and when I walked out, his eyes were shut. It wasn't sleepwalking because you could interact with him, talk to him like normal. But when I walked back into the bathroom and peeped around the corner and saw him, he looked like a robot moving around and doing things so robotically. I walked out and tried saying goodnight by him, but when I received no response, I turned around and he was facing me and just standing there like a board, mouth open, like he was trying to say something. Well, it was wide open, though. I was obviously creeped out and just thought it was a joke he was pulling. I just walked back while still facing him, turned the corner and heard shuffling, like he was rushing something. When I got back to my room and for clearance, I sleep on my bed the opposite way my bed's facing and on my stomach. So I'm laying at the foot of my bed, staring out my doors across the room so I'm facing it. Normally the lights in the hallway are off, but I heard the light switch turn on. I looked out by my door and saw feet by the bottom of them, the shadow under the door invading my room. It was there for 10 minutes. My eyes started watering for how long they were open because I didn't want to close them by all cost. When it leaves, I could not for the life of me fall asleep. Not because I was terrified, but I physically couldn't. In the morning when my mom's alarm went off at 6, I jumped out of bed as my mom left her room and hugged her. I saw my dad laying on his bed, but he was looking at me with the same face he had when I saw him in the kitchen that night. Every night it still happens. I never left my room during that period of time, and I'm terrified if someone does. I never have seen anything around the house ghost-related, but my parents and sister have, and they all heavily believe in ghosts. I never talked to them about this because I'm terrified to even think about it. The porcelain mask. When I was 12 or 13, I lived with my aunt for a few years, my younger cousin. We lived in a little house on a dead-end road in a small town of about 500 people. We're technically considered a village. My aunt was an odd soul. Everyone had their own rhythm, and hers was a different rhythm for sure. She had a fascination with the odd and the strange. From a musical dancing miniature jester figurine to old newspapers from the 20s. Then enter her collection of porcelain masks, of which she had more than 30 of. All different sizes and styles, and she had them all over her bedroom walls. The house we lived in was small but cozy. But this house had other paranormal events happen in it before and after the events of this story take place. So it was no big deal when small stuff would happen, because we were odd, so some stuff being harmless by pretty much fine by us, you could say. None of what happened before or after was harmful. This was the only event that I was actually stricken with pure fear. It was my 13th birthday, and for my birthday, I wanted all of us to watch a horror movie together, because those are my favorite kind. Still is to this day. We watched A Haunting in Connecticut. That was my chosen movie. It was my aunt and my uncle, their kids, my 2 friends, and myself there to watch it. After the movie, we all just kind of crashed. So I went to my aunt's room to sleep, because it was the only room with a TV. One of those old box TVs that would go full static every now and again. I get in there and I put something on quietly and I go to sleep. But I wake up a couple of hours later and the room is pitch black other than the light from the static on the TV. Which, if you know, it's not very much. It's basically a straight low beam. Kind of makes some stuff visible, but anything outside that vicinity gets harder and harder to see. But I can see all our masks clearly. I went to get up to change the channel, and I noticed I couldn't move. It was like some sort of sleep paralysis. My eyes could move, but my body couldn't. So I just laid there, briefly trying to wait for my body to realize when I heard a sound like somebody tapping their nails on the closet door. Just like a little foretap. I'm sure we all do when we're bored, but it caught my attention and I fixed my eyes on the closet door waiting to hear it again. Within about a minute, I had to glance to the wall, and then that closet. My aunt's masks. That's when I noticed one is missing. And I knew it because it was the one I had gotten her for Mother's Day. I did a double take because I knew where it was always hung and wasn't there. I didn't pay too much mind to it till I had to look back at the TV and I could barely see the missing mask that was missing off the wall now, barely out of light behind the TV. I knew it was the mask by the little pink flower pattern on the left cheek. At first, I thought my aunt had moved it, but no longer than I had that thought, the mask started to raise very, very slowly, raising to the ceiling and slowly making its way to directly over my face in the bed where I stayed for a couple of seconds before slowly descending to what felt like right over my face. I tried to close my eyes. Didn't help. Couldn't scream. It was like the enormous pressure being pushed at me. I could feel it looking at me and I could practically see it doing it with my eyes closed. Then out of nowhere, the pressure lifted and I heard the mask break from falling. It fell directly about where it originally hung by the closet. I lay there practically in tears, unable to do anything about it. Then it sounded like someone shaking the bedroom door as hard as possible trying to get in, but it wasn't locked. My aunt and uncle woke up to the sound of the door shaking, came to see what they thought it was doing till they got in front of the door and it swung open on its own. As soon as the door opened, it was like my body woke up and I sat up and screamed as loud as possible and pushed to the corner of the bed crying. That's when I told them what happened. They knew, by the way, and I was acting that I wasn't kidding, and, well, they would have probably doubted it a bit had it not been for the door opening on its own. Preserved in time. I was spending a summer with my dad after I finished kindergarten. This was before starting first grade. We lived in a double-wide trailer out in the sticks on a gravel back road. The type of area where you had some woods to play in, or head across the street to a recently harvested cornfield to play kickball or tag or some other childhood game. My dad and I lived with my dad's brother and his wife, as well as their 2 daughters. My cousin were a little older than me, about 4 years or so. We decided to play hide and seek one evening in the woods behind the trailer. So many spots to hide, laying down behind a fallen tree, ducking in a riverbed. Heck, if you were really crafty, you could pick a tree and climb it till you could see the whole area. We were on like round 3 when my eldest cousin said, "Is that an abandoned trailer?" When we all regrouped and me and her sister both shot glances in the direction of her stare. And sure enough, there was. But it didn't look that old. Just had the standard moss on the sides and dirt buildup as you'd expect a trailer in the woods to have. We sat there and stared at it for a second until my eldest just piped up and said, "You guys want to check it out?" To which me and her sister, both younger and eager to venture and rebel, quickly said yes. We get up right next to it, and we can see through the kitchen window, and it's definitely abandoned. But it's weird. Everything is so dusty and disorganized, but not trashed or ransacked. Just kind of like an unorganized clutter. We get to the front door, and oddly enough, it was unlocked. So we get inside, and the amount of dust in the air is so thick you can feel it when you breathe, like trying to breathe through a t-shirt. We get to looking around, and there's so much cool stuff. An antique rotary phone, engraved wooden cooking utensils, old glass maple syrup decanters. This place was like it was preserved in the 50s or 60s. We made our way back to the master bedroom, and it was so eerie. An old, freshly made bed, with a heavy-duty wooden frame, a vanity with various perfumes and makeup items, even a small jewelry box, one of the ones with a ballerina in it. We start looking in the closet. I see this old wedding dress preserves in a clear plastic wrap. But it was weird, because it looked like it had less dust on it than all the other things. That's when a cold chill ran straight up my back, made every hair stand. I turned to my cousins and I said, "I think we should leave now." They agreed, but my oldest cousin grabbed the jewelry box and said, "Finders keepers." He took off with it. I wasn't going to fight her about it because I was younger and smaller and really just wanted to get out. As we're walking out, we noticed one of those old candlesticks with a light bulb in it. And that was on the table, lit up like somebody had turned a switch on. There's no way this place has electricity. Immediately, we're all spooked and run out the door. As we're running away, we look back through the kitchen window again, and all we see is what looked like a silhouette of a very frail old lady. She had visible frizzy hair, but it was so dark no features could be seen. My cousin still has the jewelry box to this day, and it still freaks me out. House sitting in a haunted house. 3 years ago was one of my friend's birthdays. We started early around 12 and went all out till 3 a.m. One of my friends asked if I could watch their dog when they go to France. I agreed, and they showed me around the next day. When I went over, I had a gut feeling something else was there other than a dog. So they showed me around, and it was a tiny cute house with a garden. They forgot to give me their house keys, and it was like 90 degrees. So I texted them, and they said that there was an AC, and I could take it out from outside. I took it out and got into the locked house so I could let the dog out. I have a feeling this will be the reason of what happened that night. I worked in a restaurant. I got done at 11 p.m. So we had a group hang out and talked about some scary stuff that happened to each other. One of the women told me that there were 2 different ghosts that lived at the house that I was staying at. One was a sweet old lady, and the other one was not a nice guy. The not-so-nice guy was mostly in the main bedroom, and she said that it's best not to go in there, or it'll make the ghost mad. But I already did, because the couple said that's where the password for the Wi-Fi was. So I went to the house and let the dog out and hung out. Then I went to bed and had my music playing, so the dog came up on the bed to lay next to me, and it's about 1 a.m. 1 minute later, the dog jumped off the bed, and then I felt the mattress on the left side, which I was sleeping on, moving up and down aggressively. Note: the dog's medium-sized and 8 years old. It lasted for a few seconds, but it was something I wouldn't forget. I told the couple of what happened, and they said that they never happened to see them all at once, but they have occasionally seen things move. That was the first night I was there, and I had 4 more nights left of this. But nothing else happened. Guessing it was because I broke into the house to let the dog out. The hotel housekeeper of room 45. A few months ago, I went on a trip with 2 friends. Both of them are very sensitive to the supernatural. One can only sense or perceive it, while the other has told me about seeing full apparitions with all their details. We arrived at a hotel in the late afternoon. A hotel that was just over 30 years old. A beautiful hotel with hundreds of guests that day. We took the elevator and realized that our room was quite far away. We had to walk down the hallway and make 2 left turns. As we began to walk down the hallway, still decorated with a somewhat old carpet, one of my friends said, The good thing is that this hotel isn't haunted. All three of us laughed and continued to our room. The next morning, we headed to breakfast. We ran into the housekeeper in the hallway. We greeted her with good morning, and one of my friends asked her, "There's no ghosts here, right?" The housekeeper just stared at us. With nervous laughter, we insisted, "Or are there?" She also laughed nervously and quickly told us that there are. She told us that on the upper floor there's the ghost of a night guard who died of a heart attack. Several people have seen him making his rounds on that floor. Of course, only at night. And then she told us about the maid who died in room 45. The one that's practically in front of the two elevators. People say that she frequently knocks on the door of that room at different times, like when they knock to see if the guests want their room cleaned. "Well," we said, "thank you very much." We hurried off to go have breakfast. We went up to the elevator and one of my friends said, "I said there were no ghosts, but it was only to deny that I had felt something." The next evening we returned to our city activities a bit tired, but I still wanted to spend some time in the hotel lobby. We walked down the long hallway to the elevators, and when we arrived, I pressed the down button. Shortly after the bell rang to signal that the elevator had arrived, and the left-hand elevator door opened, the elevator was empty and the light was off. I'd never felt anything like this, and it scared me, so I hesitated to get in. The friend who was with me said, "Oh, that's really strange." The elevator closed its door, and we heard it go up to the floor and then down again. I was waiting for the other elevator to arrive, but it didn't. Instead, the left elevator returned and opened its door again, but this time the light was on. I truly felt goosebumps, something that had never happened to me in such a situation. And more so because I don't even believe in ghosts. I said, "How scary. Could it be that the maid from the room in front of room 45 is playing a prank on us?" I told my friend. We waited for that elevator to leave and for the right-hand elevator to arrive so we could go down without fear. I really felt that something strange had happened. How could the light in the elevator go off? There was a small switch located next to the floor buttons, and then, when it went up and down, who turned the light on? If it was empty. The ghost night guard? Well, we returned to our room after spending some time in the lobby and shaking off the scare. We told our other friend, the one who sees ghosts, told him what had happened to us. And she said, "Oh yes, it was definitely the ghost of the maid. She never used the elevators or went near that area again. And in the last few days we were there, she used the stairs on the side of her room, even though it was several floors up." This city is full of ghosts. It all began when we went to explore the back of a friend's house who owned a restaurant. In the center of the city, all the houses are old, and this house was no exception. My friend, two other friends, and I went there. Suddenly, my friend and one of the friends stayed at the threshold of one of the doors. I asked them what was wrong. They both claimed with a weird look on their face that there were ghosts there. I scoffed at them, telling them that they were crazy, and I continued on. I didn't see or feel anything. They both insisted that they felt something. I guess because they're empathetic to the paranormal, which I recently learned. Every time I wanted to go to that place for dinner, my friend refused. She said there was very negative energy there. I went back many times and nothing happened. The only thing I could witness with my own eyes was during a New Year's Eve party that we celebrated there. Three of my friends were surprised by something. I saw how a strand of one of their curly hair inexplicably remained horizontal. I didn't think anything of it. In fact, I found it funny. They just laughed nervously, and maybe that was the only thing that happened that day. Now that I remember, it was surprising, but I remained in denial. Sometime later, when I had the chance, I asked the owners of that house if they had also seen or felt anything strange. They replied that they personally hadn't. The only incident was when they were renovating the bottom floor of the house, and they unearthed a tombstone with more than 100 years of history beneath what they saw was being like a printing press of the Convent of La Cruz. They also told me that many customers and employees of their restaurant had made comments about something or someone lurking in that part of the house. The only concrete story came from a kitchen assistant who told me that she had seen a little girl. He was really scared to the point of quitting that job. A few years passed, and I liked to visit a downtown craft beer bar at night. I chatted with the bartender at the bar while talking about craft beer most of the time. One time the topic came up, and he told me that almost when it was closing time, around 2:30 a.m., he saw a man leaning against the wall next to one of the refrigerators at the entrance. There, as if he were drunk, but he wasn't a real person. He said that the apparition didn't speak or do anything. It just appeared there. Obviously, I didn't believe him. 6 years after moving to this city, my friend accompanied me to another craft beer place, also located in the downtown area of the city. We had an event, and after it ended, she sat alone at one of the tables while I went to greet and chat with the other attendees and friends. Suddenly, she called me and asked me to please leave. She was very insistent. I asked her why. She replied that she felt a ghost and that it had actually pushed her and moved the bench. I reluctantly agreed, not without telling her she was overreacting. Some time passed. I went back to that beer bar. Sometimes I chatted with the owner and sometimes with the waiter. One time I asked the waiter if there was a ghost story or anything like that there. He said yeah. I let him tell me whatever he wanted without specific questioning. He didn't give me many details, but he said that it used to be an old-style tavern, cantina in Spanish. And in the back room where my friend said she was pushed, there was a ghost of a woman, most likely a prostitute. She probably was there because she'd been murdered there. It was that day and that moment when I started to believe people who claim to see or feel ghosts. Haunted rifle. So my brother used to own this old rifle. It was a Masa Nagant made in 1936. It was used by Russian military in World War II. Now, it didn't take long for odd things to start happening. I mean, like day one, night one. Now he gets this rifle home, and we're both nerds about history. So we're examining the rifle, looking at markings, etc. Later that night, I was trying to fall asleep. I had my door open to my room when suddenly I watched a black shadow walk past my door. And it appeared to be in a wall. Now, I'm a very logical person, even then, so I thought it was my brother going to the bathroom next door. But I never saw the light go on or heard the fan, because he hits both. So I waited a bit, got up, looked in the bathroom. No one was there, and went to my brother's room, and he's gaming away with his headset on. Claims to have never even gotten up. Now this was the start of it. As the summer kicked on and school was out, a whole mess of stuff started happening. And I swear, in the middle of the night, it would sound like somebody in boots was marching in the kitchen. We would find cabinets being left open, even watched as if, well, I swear it was happening, especially on a few occasions, sometimes even hearing them being slammed shut. If you were watching TV late at night, it would feel like someone was right on top of you, like such a heavy presence on you. I even had things thrown off my desk. Had this one toy tank that sat on my desk, and I'd always find it across my room against the wall along my bed being messed up. Now, most of this happened at night, or when no one was home, but we all had encounters with the shadow, the marching, the cabinets, but I'm only one with a trashed room per se. Now, one last thing is my sister, who's 12, seems to be quite aware of spirits being present. Like we'd go somewhere that was haunted first, and could tell you who was there, how they died, type of deal, before the guide would even tell you. She refused to touch the rifle, told us to go and just get rid of it. Day 1, there were 3 attached to it. 1 was a shadow, which seems so obvious now. 1 was a female soldier who doesn't know she's dead, and a small kid who didn't really seem like a kid. Now, some of this part is a blur, but according to her, she would hear the boy in my room running around jumping on my bed. He would apparently do this when I left because he was happy I left the house, I guess. According to her, he talked to her once. Said that I reminded him of a soldier in his village, and I was a bad man. Red eyes. When I was about 5 or 6 years old, my sisters and I used to share a room. Most nights my older sister and I would see 2 distinct figures. She would see a lady in white standing in the doorway, directly in front of my bed. I would see a man with red eyes, or at least I thought it was a man. All I could see were these red eyes. Though my sister could see the lady, she said she never really spoke to her. She just stood there getting closer every night. While I, on the other hand, would see a pair of bright red eyes staring at me from the closet. A disembodied masculine voice would whisper, "JJ, come to the closet and play," over and over. Sometimes my older sister and I would jump in each other's beds and hide under the blankets until morning. This was going on for months until my dad decided to get the house blessed again. We never saw them after that. I'm 24 now. My wife and I recently had a baby. I've been having weird dreams recently. They had always started with me standing in my son's room, staring at the closet, and the familiar set of red eyes would stare back at me. My most recent dream, he actually spoke, his voice a lot deeper and booming than I remember. "You didn't come play with me, but your son may be the one to play." He said that before he woke up. Called my dad and told him about the whole thing. He told me he remembers. At least he remembers me telling him about that man years before. But then, just then, he went silent for about 5 minutes. When he spoke again, he recounted seeing the same figure as a child. He also told me he remembered having the same dream after I was born. I've blessed my house twice already, but I can only protect my son so much. I really hope, that he doesn't go back to playing in that closet. May never see him again. Jake. I wonder whatever happened to my imaginary friend. His name was Jake. Coincidentally, my name's Jacob. Leave me alone, I was a kid. Jake and I used to do a lot of things together. See, I only had sisters growing up. Desperately wanted a brother to play with. In came Jake. We used to play with my toys together. Used to play together before going to sleep. You see, Jake used to keep me calm and protect me from the red-eyed man in the closet. And that went on for at least 2 or 3 years, even after the red-eyed man went away. I do remember a few times that he was mad at me. One time being that he was choking me as I was trying to sleep. Another time was whenever I was in the room alone, night or day, I would feel a heavy pressure and this feeling of malice. Well, one day my older sister and I were reading an article. We were at the dentist's office. We were reading something about imaginary friends. The guy's imaginary friend tormented his family so much that they had to move, till he finally got rid of it. My sister happened to recall the night I woke up choking, or while I was sleeping she could see something standing over me. Needless to say, that absolutely terrified me, and I decided right then and there that Jake was no more. After the checkup, at least. As soon as we got home, I went to the room and I told Jake I didn't want to be friends anymore, and he should go home. Don't remember much after that, honestly, but I do recall after Katrina, the apartment we lived in ended up getting flooded, and during our last visit there, I felt that familiar sense of malice and pure anger coming from what used to be my bedroom. Jake was still there and said, yeah, he was M.A.D., to say the least. Still haven't seen or heard much of him since then, and I'm hoping it stays that way. Fast forward and I have a son. He's 2, and sometimes he points in the air and starts talking to whatever's there. I'm not scared given all of my experiences, but I just hope Jake or the red-eyed man doesn't make another appearance anytime soon, and I pray nothing worse finds its way to him or any of us. I was 7 and experienced this nightmare. Several years ago, I had a single chore. It was to walk the dog in the morning and the afternoon. Every day I would do this as normal, glancing at the other apartments as I was walking to the giant garbage bins behind the whole entire apartment complex and back. My absolute favorite thing to do as a 7-year-old girl was a profound love for felines, to pester the cat that belonged to one of the neighbors on the bottom floor. The cat would sit on the windowsill. You could never really see inside to see what was going on because the blinds on the right were always closed, and the other side of the window was the fluffy cat's paradise. Sometime in, I guess, maybe September, I was walking the dog again. And let me remind you, not a soul dared to put Halloween decorations up. These weren't decorations. I looked at the window to check up on my favorite little furry critter, but instead of seeing her, I saw what looked like a bald, wide-eyed man. His face was smushed up against the glass, and his face was as pale as paper without writing. His mouth wasn't open, and his face looked like something out of one of those circus things with the magic mirrors. It was all twisted and looked desperate. Like the idiot I was, I ran off, not bothering to check it out and see if it would do anything. When I was done, I returned as quickly as I could to find the man was nowhere in sight, and neither was the cat. I could still see the handprints and smudges, but he himself wasn't there. Woman in a castle. When I was in elementary school, our teachers took our class to a castle, Piavera Castle, in the northwest of Italy, if you want to take a look at it. And since we got there, I had this feeling that something was off. Our tour guide sort of walked us through the castle, telling us the story of when it was built, etc. We were going to the second floor, and at some point at the left of the stairs, there was a closed room. just a rope, you could actually see what was in there. My classmates weren't really paying any attention, just going up the stairs, but for some reason, I looked in that room and I saw this woman dressed in black. She had shining eyes and they were white and silver. She was just standing there with her hands on her belly. I was 8, maybe 9 years old, so I was pretty scared. I decided to just turn my head and forget about it. When we had lunch, our tour guide brought us to the castle park. We were on the grass and I was looking around. A bit in the distance, I saw her again, and I asked my friend if she could see her too. She told me that nobody was there, but as she was telling me, I was seeing her, just like I can see my hands right now. During the afternoon, the tour went on a little bit, but I couldn't see her anymore. Before going back on the tour bus, we used the bathrooms. We were pretty tired, so there really wasn't much chit-chat and noise that you'd expect from 8 or 9-year-olds. I was waiting for my turn, and all of a sudden I heard this loud scream and a crying sound. No one of us was screaming, and it appeared that I was the only one who heard that. After that experience, I had other experiences with hearing voices, screaming my name with an evil tone, just saying hi to me, hearing footsteps while no one's home. Even seeing someone when no one's home, but I think I said that already. Anyway, I frequently have dreams about something that's about to happen. My childhood ghost encounters. I'll also say that I've never had a paranormal encounter or an experience, since this. And I'm very thankful for that. The fear and confusion that comes from seeing certain things has a lasting effect on the mind, and it's not something that I've forgotten. I get very emotional speaking about these nights in particular. I'd appreciate any insight that you all may have, and I thank you for taking your time to hear this. My first encounter was when I was very young. I believe I was 5 or 6 when it occurred. My household growing up was a very dark environment. My dad was an abusive alcoholic who would do emotional and physical harm to my 2 siblings, myself and my mom. We never really had much, but aside from the abuse, we stayed together, and we loved one another. I'm not sure if it was the energy of that place or something that had happened there before that caused what I saw either. My sister had been kicked out by my dad, and at the time I was sleeping with her regularly. I was young and scared of the dark and generally just didn't want to sleep alone. One night I woke up suddenly facing the window of my room. It being a small single-wide trailer, the rooms weren't big at all. My dad being the way he had taken the door off because he didn't trust me for one reason or another. I just remember waking up, rolling over, and seeing this girl in a white dress in my open doorway. Her hair was black and she had no shoes on. Her hair covered her face and I couldn't see any features. None at all. I felt a foreboding feeling coming from her, and I just knew I shouldn't blink my eyes. I was afraid she would rush up and be in my face when I opened them, so I stared as long as I could. And as I did, I just felt this pulling sensation as if she wanted me to come to her. I knew that wasn't a good idea. And to be honest, I was so scared that I was basically a statue. I stared as long as I could and eventually had to blink, and when I did, she was gone. I'm not sure what would have happened had I, went to her, but I'm glad I didn't. Keep in mind that during this time I was too scared to watch horror movies or anything like that, so images like this were not normal to me. I've never seen her before and definitely not after. My second and last encounter came about 1 to 2 years after that. I'd just come home from a Valentine's dance and was getting ready for bed. I tended to sleep near my parents' room. If I could get on the couch, I'd do it, because, it felt safer. I'd had a great night with No negativity at all, which is what I can't explain about the situation even more. While trying to sleep, I started to hear a smacking noise, kind of like what people who eat with their mouth open sound like. I was very confused, so I looked down the side of the couch at the floor and I saw what looked like a head. I stared at it for a bit because it was making noise. Eventually, it slowly started looking up at me, and I could see that it had the features of an old man. It was smacking its mouth and it looked like a lot of blood was coming out. I got so scared that I jumped up, stamped on the head. I don't remember feeling anything solid other than the floor, and I did so. Ran into my parents' room, crawled in the bed beside my mom, and I tried to sleep. Wanted to check my surroundings because I was still feeling unsafe. I saw the head everywhere now, like it had duplicated itself. It was all over the sheets and on the floor beside the bed. All of them were staring at me and smacking their lips. All I could do was put my head under the covers and pray. I eventually fell asleep. I'm not sure if it was the toxic environment I grew up in or what that caused this to happen. I've never forgotten these experiences. I've never even wrote this long of a post on Reddit, period. I just felt like I needed to get it off my chest and see what some others believe might think. That's the end of tonight's stories. I'm going to record my own stories for you guys, probably put it up on the 1st next month, or maybe the 13th. Yeah, let's make it the 13th. Look forward to that. See ya.